Serious, what is the least professional thing a medical professional has ever said to you? I was 7 months pregnant and had gone in for my usual monthly checkup. I had a nurse practitioner that I saw every time, and I loved her. She went to use the sound machine thingy to listen to my son's heartbeat and we heard nothing. She said very nonchalantly what it died. I knew the batteries had run out, so I just busted up laughing. She knew immediately what she had said and turned every shade of red, but relaxed when she saw me laughing so much. I miss her. I think if I was her, that would be the thing that you remember right before you go to sleep and then not go to sleep. I was at my general practitioner's office because I was having some strange symptoms with my breast. The nurse comes in and when I explain to her what's happening she goes, "Oh, you're probably pregnant. I wouldn't worry about it." I was 16. Needless to say I freaked out, told the doctor what she had said, and the doctor then went out into the hallway where I heard her give the nurse an earful about diagnosing patients unnecessarily and scaring them. Also, for the record, I wasn't pregnant, I just had a cyst. "Oh, you're probably pregnant. I wouldn't worry about it." Give the nurse an earful about diagnosing patients unnecessarily. Personally, I'm much more concerned by the "I wouldn't worry about it" than the diagnosing itself. I mean, the diagnosing is also concerning, but adding that bit makes it worse to me. It says on your chart that you have Crohn's disease. Are you sure? Said with the most condescending voice I have ever heard. Yeah, I'm sure. I've been on medication for 5 years. I've had 3 doctors, gone in and out of remission twice. I'm sure. She also speaks to me like I'm mentally retarded. I had to check with the receptionist that I put English as my first language because I also speak Spanish and my doctor kept pantomiming things for me. Needless to say, I'm in the process of getting a new doctor. Male Gino told me having my period for 63 straight days was normal. When I voiced my opposition, he flippantly said, "Well, then you have cancer." I got Lyme disease when I was 13. It gave me arthritis and made my knee swell to the size of a grapefruit, and I'm a pretty tiny girl to begin with, and after a course of antibiotics, my mom brought me to a doctor friend of the family to get my knee drained. The doctor put a needle the size of a turkey baster, or at least, that's how I remember it, into my knee to start draining it, and I shouted in pain. The doctor chuckled, turned to my mother, and said that's what she's gonna sound like on her wedding night. Take it out. Like, what the frick? Dude, I hadn't even started high school yet. Wow, this one is beyond the pale. My husband got really sick after his vasectomy. We went to our GP to see what was going on. After my husband described his symptoms, the doctor asked for a urine sample, so my husband did. A few minutes later the doctor comes and asks my husband, "Do you like to eat a lot of sweets?" My husband said, "Yeah, I guess so." Then doctor goes, "Not anymore. You have diabetes." Then just walked out of the room. The nurse came in and gave him a prescription and that was it. We had a million questions. The nurse said to just look up everything on the internet because the doctor had other appointments to worry about. I don't know if that would be unprofessional, but it was pretty fricked up. No, that is definitely unprofessional. He complimented my breasts. I think it was supposed to put me at ease, as he could tell I was nervous, but I lowered the gown and he said they're marvelous and gave me a friendly smile. Oh man, not okay. I had a doctor once unclasp my front clothes bra during a routine physical. I thought he should have asked me to do it myself, not sure it was even necessary. Then he kept trying to get me to agree to a pelvic exam even though I told him I'd recently been to the gynecologist. Sigh. My physician in college had a bad habit of inviting my mom to sit in the examining room with me even though I was older than 18. I didn't have a car yet, so my mother drove me. She'd then say things like, "I am supposed to ask if you drink alcohol, but you are a good girl, so I know you don't." So yeah, I got to lie by omission to my primary care doctor for my entire college career. Sister-in-law had the same thing, only the doctor asked if she'd had any recent carnal activity. My mom was unable to give birth properly, so my brothers and I were all C-sections. When she went in for one of us, a nurse walked in, saw what she was having done and said, "Does it make you feel like less of a woman knowing you can't give birth properly?" My mom screamed at her until she left. I had a nasty ear infection as a young teen. My parents were sitting in front of me when the doctor peered in my ear with an otoscope and let out a loud WTF. I broke my eardrum in my teens, and the ear doctor treating it happened to be a friend of the family. During the initial exam he asked me to put my finger in my opposite ear, because otherwise he was looking clear through my head. I had it in there for about 5 seconds before realizing he was pulling my leg. In university I suddenly had irregular heartbeat, passed out randomly, developed eczema and had hair falling out by the handful. Saw a university clinic doctor who told me that my problem was failure to accept the appropriate female role of wife mother. He pulled out a book, the DSM, and started reading out a bizarre mental health disorder. I recommended that he insert the book rectally. Went to another doctor who did a blood test. My thyroid levels were life-threateningly low. Doctor said I was at risk of dying from irregular heartbeat. Started Synthroid, which helped the worst of the symptoms. When I was 18/19 I went to the pharmacy to get some cream for a rash I had. I wasn't sure what to get, so the shop assistant put me in a little room to wait for the pharmacist to take a look at me. When she eventually came into the room the pharmacist said, "Let me guess, you're here for the morning after pill. You should not assume." I was in labor with my second child for just under 40 hours, and it was rough. I was insanely overtired from being up all night 2 nights in a row, and was just about to finally get the epidural. I'll never understand why I waited so long. Anyways, as they're about to put this huge needle into my spinal cord, I started crying because I was scared. The nurse standing in front of me said in a snotty, annoyed tone, "This isn't your first time. You knew what you were signing up for." At that point I had zero filter, and let out a heartfelt "foo-woo-woo-woo-woo." That was the only appropriate response in that instance. 5-ish years ago I had a really bad cold and I was wishing for death every time I cough. So I visited the urgent care and he did a x-ray on my lungs. I had a small mass of cancer in my lung. It made sense because I used to smoke. Despite being scared senseless, I told him about my smoking history. This doctor said, "No, it is probably due to your gay lifestyle." I got a new doctor in a new hospital real quick after that. The new doctor did an x-ray on my lungs and said I damaged my lungs from smoking, so the illness is lingering in my lungs a bit longer. I just needed to go home and cough everything up. I never had cancer. I had mucus. That deserved an official complaint. A nurse practitioner at the OB-GYN's office doubted me when I told her I had 0 pregnancies. She said I should include any abortions as pregnancies. I repeated 0, but she still doubted me. I asked her if she was doubting me because I'm Latina or because she didn't believe in the effectiveness of birth control pills. Then she got embarrassed and moved on to the next question. This was before the physical examination, so she was making that assumption based on our initial meeting. And I was only 25 and quite fit at the time. Me, F. When I was 14 years old, had heavy periods every 2 weeks, like clockwork. 14 days to recover, then 5 days of heck, was anemic, vomiting, etc. Went to docs with my mom. They told me it would all calm down once I'd had kids. Mom went mental at them, like, why would you tell a 14-year-old that she needed to get pregnant? They put me on the pill. I was a late bloomer in the romance department and had a doctor literally not believe me when I said I'd never been active in my private life. She started prescribing birth control and being extremely condescending and saying things like it was okay to admit it and I wasn't a S and she wouldn't tell my parents, but I was going to get pregnant if I didn't listen to her. While in the middle of getting a vasectomy, feet in stirrups and coin purse open, the doctor starts to try to sell me on a pyramid scheme. You look like a smart man. What if I told you that you could save 50% on some of the most common household items you buy? Sounds great, doc. I mean, what the frick am I supposed to say? The guy literally has me by the balls. I was 16 at the gyno. My doctor somehow was this woman my mom had known for years. I was already uncomfortable that she knew me outside of being my doctor, but I didn't have to get a pap smear or anything that time, so I figured I'd just see someone else the next time. I just completed a round of antibiotics and I asked the lady how long until the pill was supposed to be working again, and she just sneered at me. You shouldn't rely on just the pill, you should always use a condom. Don't make me tell your mom. Yeesh. Interesting how she switched from sound medical advice to unprofessional in the same sentence. When I was like 9, I had some kind of defect in my tooth, a crack or something that exposed the nerve to air and liquids, which was very painful. So the dentist is squirting air and water right into the tooth so that I'm crying, and he yells, "Come on, you're ruining my day." My mom could hear him yelling at me from the waiting room, so she grabbed me and we left to find another dentist. Quit flinching. It doesn't hurt that much, you big baby, said to me by a doctor who was sewing up my severely cut up face. It was immediately followed by a nurse saying, "What concerns me, doctor, is how cold he is." For context, I had lost a lot of blood in the woods and my friends had to drag me through a creek back to civilization. It was during the spring thaw, so the water was pretty cold. Couple that with a significant amount of blood loss and I'm shivering like the bejesus. I was having dental work done and the dental assistant says to the dentist, "Are you the one that hired that new receptionist?" The dentist says, "Nope, but I'm sure glad somebody did. She's got some beautiful legs." The assistant says, "Yeah, they'd be even nicer if they were wrapped around my neck with my face between them," to which the dentist just laughs, nods his head at me and says, "This guy knows all about that, right?" I was like 11-12 years at the time. I was doing the keto diet and was already down from 300 to about 250 and he looked at me and said, "Your diet will not work. You need to get the gastric band." I literally looked at him and said, "Dude, I've lost 50 pounds in roughly 2.5 months. How is that not working?" He didn't really have a comeback for that. If you live in the US, it's probably because he gets a kickback for every gastric band he sells. I'm going to need to see some death certificates. That just doesn't happen. I went to my primary care physician for, I don't even know what I was asking for, help. I was in therapy but I wasn't sleeping anymore. I had had 3 family members commit suicide in 3 months. 3 generations. First was a maternal uncle. Next was a paternal cousin. Last was my maternal grandfather. I couldn't function by the end. I slept maybe 2 hours a day in 20-minute increments. I couldn't focus long enough to finish a sentence. I was hallucinating, having panic attacks. I became fixated on being cursed. All of this, I'm certain, was a result of my inability to fricking sleep. I switched PCPS, got prescribed 1 month of Ativan and sleeping pills, kept up with therapy and moved the frick on. I did bring copies of the death certificates though, because frick that doctor for treating me like a piece of crap. I had been his patient for years, no history of med seeking, and something had obviously happened. I offered to sign a release to have him contact my therapist. Lazy butthole couldn't be bothered. I had a nurse practitioner refuse to give me birth control when I was 19 at the gynecologist's office because I didn't have any children. I asked if I could check out my options since I had previously had issues with the pill and the Depo-Provera shot. She said, "Sorry, we only give IUDs and implants to women." I asked her what that meant and she said, "Oh, you don't have any kids yet." I definitely don't want kids. That's the idea. I was 19/20, suicidal. Finally a friend convinced me to seek out a psychiatrist. After 2 appointments, he tells me, "Society doesn't find this acceptable." He motioned to my body, "I'm fat." He said he'd refer me to a diet doctor and a doctor for the acne. I had never been concerned with my very minor acne. He said as I lost weight I'd start dressing better too. I had worn my best outfit because I was terrified and anxious, and though I looked pretty good, I left and cried in my car, went home and locked myself in my room for 3 days. I refused to see another psychiatrist for years and even became completely agoraphobic for a while. Thankfully, a few years later I knew I had to see a psychiatrist, and though standing weekly appointments over years and medication, I was able to get help for my severe depression, social anxiety, and able to learn to cope with the way I was raised and my codependency. Those support groups like CODA, Codependence and Al-Anon, for the families of alcoholics. Frick that guy though, for real. Frick crappy psychs, I swear to God. You've put yourself in an incredibly emotionally vulnerable place with a stranger, and they say bulls like this. It's so damaging. I'm a female and at the time had undiagnosed GI problems. I went to the ER for extreme stomach pain and blood in my stool. I had to have a rectal exam and the male examiner said, I'm sure you're used to having things go in your butt. Me. F. Went to see my optometrist because I was having blurred vision in my final year at university. He told me that if I stayed home and had children I wouldn't have this problem. Still makes me angry some 25 years later as a university graduate. I pinched something in my back on a training ride. Bike racing. I explained to the PA that I'd just finished a 90-mile ride and felt a weird numb patch about the size of a hand near my shoulder blade. She ignored investigating the issue I'd gone in for and wrote me a psych referral for riding a bicycle 90 miles. To be fair, if she were joking that would have been hilarious. She told me she didn't believe anxiety was a legitimate medical condition and I need to just get over it. She also told a friend of mine that she wouldn't refer her to an eating disorder clinic because the only treatment for anorexia is to just snap out of it. So, yeah, never go to that doctor with a mental health issue. I just recently had a doctor tell me you need to get over your personal problems when I asked about my anxiety. What a freaking Richard Cranium. My psychiatrist, knowing full well I struggle with suicidal thoughts linked to my self-esteem, told me, you don't have the perfect body, you need to look good in a bikini, you should try ultrasound therapy that vibrates the adipose tissue in your stomach. I filed an official complaint against her, and her supervisor called me to ask about it. She then proceeded to defend the psychiatrist. Needless to say, I note the F out of there. If you ever need mental health assistance, never go to Sick International in the Netherlands. PS. I'm not obese. Not that it should matter. Told a doctor during a physical that I smoked weed and she proceeded to tell me I was a bad person and I needed to quit. She then wrote on the physical form, which I needed to return to my nursing teacher, that I'm a marijuana user. It didn't end there. She then walked down the hallway to the nursing station and I could hear her telling all the nurses that she couldn't believe a nursing student smoked marijuana. Complete HIPAA violation. I filed an official complaint about her and threatened legal action. She is no longer a doctor at that facility. I filed an official complaint about her and threatened legal action. I wish more people filed complaints. I'm appalled at the horror stories that I have heard, IRL and over the internet, about those crappy doctors. My grandfather was in a horrible accident that involved a 700-pound piece of concrete steps falling on him while he was in a ditch. When they were able to remove it 2 hours later he ended up going into a coma. My grandmother was trying to stay positive and hopeful, so she was making plans for when he got out of the hospital and went home. A doctor overheard her and rudely told her he isn't ever going home. I had a tooth that had a cavity in it and needed filled. I was just supposed to go in for a routine cleaning, and my mom and I had plans later that day. The dentist said he would do it now. I said I needed to go and ask my mom if we had time. I was all of 14. He put his hand on my shoulder to keep me from getting up and told me I didn't need to ask her. I was old enough to make my own decision. It's definitely a WTF moment. Then my decision is that I would like to consult with my mom. What a joke. You're just a fat lazy student, drinking too much and eating too many pies. Go on a diet. Turns out I had a brain tumor and it was fricking with my hormones. Cheers. Oh, just wait a few days and see if it goes away. That's what the doctor told me when I said I had red and black streaks running up my arm. It was blood poisoning. This is the first one that's made me go WTF. Blood poisoning can kill you quickly and it's pretty easy to spot. I was about 20, went to my GP with severe chest pains and got laughed out of the office saying I was too young for anything serious. They told me I had a pulled muscle and indigestion. It wasn't a heart attack but was related to an undiagnosed condition. I was too young for anything serious. I got this response from a doctor once. 2. Further testing revealed I have a heart defect that almost killed me. I asked a doctor for a referral to a psychologist. He followed up with what's making you anxious. At the time I didn't know exactly what was giving me panic attacks on campus. I just knew that whenever I thought about uni or going to class it was very hard for me to breathe or think straight. I responded with uni. He then asked what are you studying, and once he got an answer he scoffed and replied with you have nothing to be anxious about. Kids these days have it so easy. I'd never felt so ashamed and embarrassed about asking for help than I did on that day. My mother was in the hospital years ago. She had gotten into a weird state and had taken way too many blood pressure pills. They were doing some IV thing to try and get her blood pressure back to normal. As the doctor's explaining all the details, my father asks, "Okay, so if this doesn't work, what else can we do?" The doctor replies, "There's nothing else we can try. She will die. She will be dead. D in the most blunt, cold and borderline combative way you can imagine." We both completely broke down and I had to fight a strong urge to knock him cold. When I was a teenager I was sick and had to see the doctor pretty urgently, so the secretary squeezed me into the schedule that day. While I was in the room waiting for him to come and I heard him throw the biggest tantrum about having to see me in the hallway right outside my door. He stomped into the room, threw me a prescription for an allergy medicine I was already taking, clearly never read my chart, and stormed out of the room before I could even say a word. Squeezed into the schedule. Tantrum about having to see me. Sounds like the doc was having issues with the secretary and took it out on you. Sorry about that. Not to me but my uncle. "Oh, you're just faking it to get drugs," turns out. After having my sister, who is an RN, force them to do a scan, he had severed his aorta and should have been dead. I don't understand how some of these people become doctors. It's not that unprofessional but kinda was. My blood pressure was a little high or something, so they wanted to do a cholesterol test. I told her I ate breakfast already and had coffee and she said, "Well, it doesn't really matter, just don't tell them that when they take your blood." I'm not a doctor but I think it does matter, like quite a bit. I was talking to my rheumatologist about insurance and she said, "Ugh, I hate those cocksuckers." It made me respect her even more. This was a breath of fresh air after some of the crap I read on here. Thanks. When I was admitted into hospital for anorexia, a nurse came to look at my chart and saw that I'd lost an insane amount of weight, 10 kg, in 2 weeks, since I was last discharged from a treatment clinic, and she said to me, "I wish I could lose weight that quickly." My mum was appalled. I have plenty more stories about inappropriate things being said to me by medical professionals. A psychiatrist told my husband the best thing he could do for his bipolar was to get right with God and then proceeded to tell him about Daniel in the lion's den. That was the last time we went to him. A long time ago when I was maybe 17, my period stopped for like 8 months. I kept making appointments along the way throughout those 8 months to figure out what was going on. Each time, they simply insisted that I could be pregnant, despite negative pregnancy tests and the seemingly unbelievable fact that I was a virgin. They never even did a blood pregnancy test, and never thought about other reasons a 17-year-old's period may stop. I eventually got diagnosed with PCOS, but only once I moved to the big city, got new docs. I think the hometown docs weren't aware that thin girls can have PCOS too, or that a 17-year-old could be telling the truth about being a virgin. All those 8 months they had me almost scared into thinking I could be pregnant too, despite the total impossibility of it. I was petrified. So basically the unprofessional thing they said repeatedly, to me, and my mom, was that I could be pregnant, and probably just pregnant, etc., without checking for other culprits. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.